So everybody was talking about all these narratives and the people who are meeting the dead. And these are the people I meet in my fieldwork in Korea. So I will be talking about a living tradition, something that happens now. And many of the stories and the things we heard today, I just hear from the people who experience them. So I find this meeting so enriching to me. And maybe now we come to the present tense and tell stories that we heard in the past tense, very similar, from very far away, from these mostly European stories that we heard. So traditional Korean beliefs are grounded in a strong connection between people and their ancestors. The actions of the living are believed to impact the dead, who expect to be regularly remembered and honored and venerated. This respect for the deceased is expressed through various complex rituals, many of which have persisted through with certain adaptations, I would say, into this hypermodern urban Korean society. So these practices exist now in Seoul, very common. So let's start our story with what we're gonna try to keep you focused in this last part of the day. I'll talk a little bit about the traditional cosmology, who are the people and the non-people, non-human entities. I'll talk about some popular narratives as case studies, and then about the agency. What can we do as people to affect all these kind of supernatural entities, and about placemaking. And what we see is a grave, a typical Korean grave, which is a bit different from what we are used to see, scattered all over the rural areas around the mountain, feet of the mountain. We see these mounds, not always with the tombstones. They can be just ground. So it's a bit different from what we're used to. So let's talk about cosmology a little bit. Let's start that. We talk in Korea about people and Shin. Shin can be all kinds of entities. They can be ancestors, they can be spirits of historical figures, even Genghis Khan, even John d'Arc, even General MacArthur who helped Korea in the Korean War. So it can be different historical figures with names and dates. They can be spirits of nature, like Shin, the mountain god, like other Shin, Samshin, the spirit of birth. They can be the spirit of the 7 stars of the Great Dipper constellation, Chilsong, a very common entity to be venerated. And they're all Shin, which is interesting, like one title for all. Now, mansin, the person that we will see soon in a better photograph, is a person who practices communication with these different Shin, and man in Korean is 10,000. So mansin means 10,000 Shin entities. It's hard to call them spirits, souls, gods, venerated ancestors, because all these are Shin. And the mansin can communicate with these entities and tell people what the entities want, think, need, etc. So the mansin we see here is So Kyung-uk. She's now around, here she's probably 65, she's in her 70s now, and she's performing a ritual. She's dressed with a typical mountain god attire. So she's wearing this red crown with a red hat with paper flowers. And she's divining the future here with colorful flag. She has musicians, and all the Shin around her are only a small part of the mansin that she venerates, right? So we can see spirits of ancestral shamans. This would be the one with the fans in their hands up there. We can see Shin somewhere there with the white beard. And we can see different generals because she worships all kinds of historical generals. And that's why she can help people who want to make money or politics, because she worships very strong men. So other shamans have different central figures in their shrines. So when she does this ritual, when she performs, she becomes possessed with the entities and she speaks their words. And the act is called, the kongsu is opening the gate of words. That's what she does. And she can tell people what their dead relative think about. So people are buried in the ground, but they can speak through her body. And that's what I'll focus on today, more than the worship of the nature or natural elements. So a short time after death, people are expected to hold a ceremony for the departed soul with the goal of resolving any unresolved grudges that might keep the dead from going to the afterworld. So she will embody the spirit and try to resolve the grudges. Somebody harmed her, somebody did anything, they can apologize, like relative, people come and apologize, etc. And she can either forgive or not. So, I mean, the mansin speaking for the dead, that can be also male. Most mansin are female, like 80% or 90%. In such ritual, she becomes possessed, she speaks the words, people become very emotional, there is a catharsis, there are tears, there are shouts, there are pushes, it's very emotional and sensual. Somebody asked, what do they do? How do they talk to the dead? So when you see it, you can see that the relative oftentimes say, the mansin didn't know that. Secrets are revealed, family secrets, hidden money, all kind of stuff can be revealed. And when it becomes verified, people think that this mansin, for example, So Kyung-wook, this woman, is very successful because many of the prediction, the stuff she said, worked out. So it's a word of mouth thing. There is no official initiation or, a diploma that you can hang. So it's a word of mouth thing. They have to be successful or they perish because it's very expensive. Like this ritual would cost nowadays something like 20,000 euros probably, 1 or 2 days ritual. It's very expensive. I mean, the offering in the altar, every fruit that you see is like 10 euros. They buy the most expensive stuff for the ancestors. And the musicians are the best, etc. So yeah, you don't do it if you don't really want to venerate your ancestor. So, in contemporary life, many people forgo these expensive and time-consuming rituals. Why would I stay 2 days and hear all the stuff revealed? And we don't believe in that, like many people mentioned right now. We are secular Koreans in Seoul. But then when the family experiences a disaster, series of disasters, etc., then they would go to a mansin. Because then suddenly they're thinking maybe some ancestral spirit is unhappy because we didn't hold the parting ritual. Then the ritual will be more expensive, probably. So when you go to a mansin and ask her about, like I did 20 years ago when I started, how have the ritual prevailed in Korea and all this kind of question that I came with, thinking that it's something that is about to perish. They said, people always have problems. And the Korean deep traditional belief is that the dead have thorny hands. So if you let the dead hover around you, you're going to be afflicted. So when a family experiences a series of problems, even if they're secular, oftentimes in Korea, somebody in the family would say, that sounds like a mansin's thing. Go to a mansin. And then if it's resolved, of course, the mansin becomes famous, the family becomes happy, and the 20,000 euro becomes like something that was worthwhile. And in other cases, some of which have reached court in Korea, the family feels betrayed, the mansin is marked as a fake mansin, and that happens too. So we have this kind of living tradition that reaches all kind of forms in modernity. Now, this spirit departure ritual should be followed by special attention to the location of the grave. So this practice is called pungsu, and pungsu is an art of deciphering the earth's power, and the dead should be placed in the right place, otherwise they'll keep coming back and trying to fix it. So I brought a quote from a book by Hong Kei-yoon from 2018. He said, Feng Shui is a unique and comprehensive system of conceptualizing the physical environment which regulates human ecology by influencing men or women to select auspicious environments and to build harmonious structures. If the grave, and we'll focus on graves today, so if the grave is not harmonious, then the spirit will not be restful. Then the spirit will haunt the family. So it's connected to mansin's work, but it's different specialists. And the other thing that he says in his book, the book is about the history of Feng Shui. If anybody is interested, it's a new book comparatively. He said geomancy, which is Feng Shui, does neither fall into the categories of religion and science nor superstition. So it's kind of complicated because it's related to the power of the earth. It is done scientifically by all kind of measurements, and it's also a belief. What can you do? So the burial site also has to match the date of the birth and death, the exact hour, all kind of spiritual needs of the family. So it's kind of a science and belief and religion and everything is together. And then the person is buried, okay? So we're good. Burial places can look differently, and that's a way how Korean culture exists within the environment. These are the graves of the kings from the 5th and 6th century in Shilla's kingdom. They are very big, but normal people's grave are like maybe 1.5 meters in diameter, what we've seen in the beginning. And these are king's grave. Beyond the mound, you have all kind of structures for veneration. So you can find these everywhere in Korea. In traditional Korea, there wasn't a graveyard. Every family would purchase a piece of land and bury their dead, and usually they'll try to buy a big piece of land to bury all their dead together, because in New Year, in Korean New Year around February in Seoul, and in autumn fall, which would be in October usually, in Chuseok holiday, people have to go to the grave and venerate the dead. So if they did the parting ritual, they build a grave with a Pungsu specialist, and they do Seollal and Chuseok, probably they feel that they will not have to undergo any further specific rituals in mansin. But suddenly, the dead can say that they were buried in a wrong way because the Pungsu specialist was not good. It's very vernacular, very flexible. So in recent years, many Koreans cannot afford to buy land to bury their dead, and they started cremating them. Usually it used to be a Buddhist priest practice. So now when they burn them, there's more work for mansin because there's no actual grave. Some ancestors like it, some don't. So let's talk about a few narratives before we get to the end of how this belief system works in real, normal, modern life. So I'll skip the Taoism part, I think. That's the tradition, but maybe it's important to note that this is the holiest mountain. It's on the border of China and North Korea, and mansin go to worship there. That's the center of power in Korea. And then Tozon, like Taoist and Buddhist famous figure, determined that as the holiest place, and there's a whole mountain range that goes across the peninsula, and that's the center of Qi. Now the Japanese, and now moving on to the Japanese story, the Japanese did what was called Pungsu invasion. So they were trying to divert all this energy of the earth. So for example, here we see how they build, this is after the Korean War, that's the building, the Governor General building, inside the palace, disrupting what was supposed to go like the Qi from the mountain through the palace. That's how it looks now, and all the way to Seoul, to the city and to the people. So the Japanese kind of invaded the earth. Now, how does that relate to dead people? The last king of Korea, King Kojong, he was the last king that the Japanese deposed. When he died in 1919, his funeral became a mass demonstration against Japanese, because the Koreans felt that what the Japanese did to the earth in Korea was an insult to him. And now that he's dead, the Korean people have to show that they care. Otherwise, a king spirit, you don't want to upset them. So they were protesting, and that brought out many people to the streets. Another story that prevailed was that the Japanese were inserting metal spike in very auspicious places to disrupt the earth and unearthing dead bodies of important Koreans, so that Korea would, fall apart. So in this film, and that would be probably the way I'll show how popular culture helps to preserve this narrative. This is the most successful film in 2024, Exhumation in English. And that's about a rich family that had a problem. They called the mansin, the beautiful woman here actually, the actress, of course. She comes and she said there's a problem with an ancestral grave. But when they unearth the grave, which is this little mound here, and they can kind of take the cask out and do all kind of stuff, suddenly spirits of Japanese generals from the 16th century come up with the metal spikes and all the story. So they have to purify the site with these white papers and sacrifice pigs. Now this looks weird, but you would see it in every shaman ritual nowadays. The animal sacrifice, the purification, and all what is done for the ancestors. And the last case I'll say briefly is, what do you do with people without graves of the Korean War? You can either go and do the Chuseok ritual here, where people bow with their heads to the ground, close to the Korean and North Korean border, apologizing to their ancestors that there's no grave. 3 million people died. That's a very sad story. But you have mansin performing on the Korean border, apologizing for the ancestors. So we talked about cleansing, and that would be how they do it normally in Chuseok. So that's what I'm talking about, how the well-being of Korean people is perceived as related to the ground, how Feng Shui is a science, belief, practice of location of graves, how it's been politicized and used privately and in political issues. And of course, my last remark would be that the popular media, like the film Exhuma, brings it to life, and people read and know and watch the film. And there was a full shamanic ritual in the film. So every Korean who watched it know how a Korean ritual looked like, even if they never sponsored one. Well, that was very Freudian, right?
There was the spirits coming to us at the very end of the seminar.
Always something would happen when I talk about Korean War spirits. I'm serious, yeah. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you. And if you're able, just one question. We see so many cultures where we have shamans who act as therapists, who engage with the dead, resolve issues, and deal with that. Is it ever the case that a spirit does not want to resolve things and there is no catharsis? Do we ever see a mansin say, no, it won't work?
Usually they'll say there'll be another ritual. But the fact is that they never want to go. That's the true thing. They never want to go. They never want to leave. It's a long process of negotiation with the mansin and her helpers, because she's embodying the spirit, right? So the helpers are like, so what do you want? Oh, I want you to build a new grave in North Korea. No, but North Korea, we cannot. So what will we do? So I don't know. I'm angry. And she starts spilling all the offerings and, the mansin. So what can we do? And it goes on and on. It can go the whole night. I mean, I've been in rituals that were scheduled to end. All the scholars and the filmmakers left, and I'm kind of staying to help clean up. And suddenly, the spirit said, no, I'm back. Not gone. And then there's negotiation going on all night. I haven't seen a case that it wasn't resolved. Some cases, they say, we'll resolve it for now. Let's do something and see if you're happy. Let's buy a bell for the mansin's house. She'll, cling the bell every day. The client will pay, of course. And your name will be on the bell. And you'll know that you're remembered, even though you don't have a gravesite. So that's very interesting when I ask mansin about the spirits. And why do they need a burial to be so good if they can actually solve it without a grave, right? And there's no good response. The grave is the best, A good grave is the best.
It reminds you that the shaman, whoever they are, has to be creative.
Oh, yeah.
And has a great deal of power, of course.
Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you so much. Wonderful.